Sharpeville then occurs, 21st March 1960. It changes my life. It's the turning point. And I was so horrified. For me, it was existential.
Yes.
That I was disturbed being a white with privilege in this country at the expense of black people.
Yeah.
And I'm 20 now, so I'm beginning to mature. And I actually thought, I've got to leave this country because I'm actually benefiting from the enslavement of blacks, playing spies and clandestine work. But of course I was driven by an objective. It was simple, freeing black people so we had equality.
The ANC that you knew, that you were part of, that fought for liberation, that was so revolutionary, now in 2025 is in a coalition with the Democratic Alliance. In order to give us a better understanding of our country and to give us a better understanding of perhaps what our future will be. Thank you very much for joining me in that regard.
So can I say, Siyabonga kakhulu. Kilebocha. I am delighted to be here in your beautiful studio and to be with you.
I'm glad. Where many generations meet at the same time. I'm excited. So just to begin, you are known as someone who was heavily involved in the struggle against apartheid, for freedom. You have an interesting history, as a white man of Jewish descent. How did you get involved in the anti-apartheid struggle? What was your motivation? And can you tell me more about the work you did? Because I know, you were around the world. You were one of the founding members of Mkhwanazi. You were involved in guerrilla training across the world and on the continent. How did you get involved in this?
Okay, can I just say,
Yes.
I would never change my life for anything. I'm really blessed to have found a link into the liberation struggle of Africa and of Ikaya, South Africa. A little white kid growing up in a very white working class, lower middle class suburb of Yeovil.
Wow.
In the 40s, when it was white.
When it was white, not now.
Black township. The only black people in those days were the servants and messengers from the stores. My parents weren't political. They were immigrants from Eastern Europe, the Russian Empire, before the revolution. My grandparents from both sides had fled because of the persecution of Jews, and also because they were looking for a place that they could be uplifted economically.
Yes, indeed.
Where I was very lucky was with a mother and a father. A mother who really taught me how to be kind-hearted to people, and especially the underdog. They weren't very religious, secular family upbringing, and the Judaic part, even the Zionist part, because I'm 10 years old when Israel illegally becomes independent with the aid of the West, particularly the British from Balfour. They weren't so impressed. They didn't want to go to a place called Palestine. But she really detested the way even uncles of mine would talk about Yabantu and friends and the neighbors. And she'd say, Ronald, she liked to call me Ronald, you must never speak like that about people. And she said to me, all people are good. And in terms of our religion, what it says is the same that Christians say and Islamic people say, that treat others like you wish them to treat you. So I had that upbringing. My father was a kind of stricter, quiet, reserved person, but he was a worker, actually, white collar. He worked for a factory up the road from where we are now in Doornfontein as the representative selling the product, but it was lower level sweets, which were mainly for the poor white areas, the colored, mixed race Indian areas in the township. in my holidays, school, I would go proudly with my father holding his briefcase with the sample case of the sweets. And I started seeing the townships. I was shocked. What whites see the townships? Most of the shopkeepers were either Chinese or Muslim. And what I was so pleased without understanding that they would greet my father when we walked into the store. Mr. Kasrils, good day. Please come and sit down and have a cup of tea. They could see he's driving all over this, not city here, but the whole of the then Transvaal, Gauteng and beyond, tired out, etc. What would the little boy like? Want a samosa? Do you want a cold drink? And then I would go and sit on the balcony and I'd watch the little African kids playing football. I'd say I was pleased without understanding that my father in his suit and very smart in those days and hat, take off his hat, Mr. Mullah, Mr. Muhammad, good day to you. He respected people. I couldn't understand, but I felt there was something good about it. I would say to him, driving back to Yeovil, Daddy, why are those little boys playing with these rag balls? Why is there no trees there? Ronnie, because you are seeing the poor people who are exploited.
Oh, wow. He explained it to you in that way.
And so he was a trade unionist. It's an all-white trade union, but it was quite progressive because a man called Eli Weinberg, who was a communist actually, was the secretary of that trade union. Okay. And he would say to me, you must understand that it's very difficult working for a living unless you're a boss. And they always want to cheat the workers.
Yes.
And he would say, white and black.
Oh.
And his view, just as like a trade unionist, was a man, and he would use that language, okay, who does work must get a good pay. That kind of thing was inculcated in my heart. So I'm going to go fast forward.
Yes.
In school, I started rebelling. I didn't like the way they taught history until I had a history teacher who taught us, when I was about 16, towards matric, the French Revolution. And he was very progressive, but very careful because of apartheid.
Because then he could be targeted.
Kicked out.
Yes, yeah.
So when he taught the French Revolution, I started realizing that when he spoke about the nobility and the serfs, the peasants, that it was, you could see it was whites and blacks.
Like in South Africa, yeah.
So I started thinking, and I started doing very well in history, etc. I then started, fortunately, making friends with black people, and especially in the work I chose when I left school, aged 18 with a matric. I started working, like you guys here, for the movies.
Oh, nice.
And there was a movie company where Balfour Park is, you know where that is, down in the northern suburbs on the way to Alexander.
Yes.
So I was working there, and we met up with black people who we were doing commercial films for the market. And who comes along but Miriam Makeba and that group from King Kong.
Oh, yes.
And so I loved music and township music. So I started getting into it that way and making friends across the colour line. That was illegal. You couldn't go and mix that way. You couldn't have alcohol, etc. So I kind of liked that edge to society. It was exciting. Sharpeville then occurs, 21st March 1960. It changes my life. It's the turning point. And I was so horrified that by then I was always talking with people, and a bit sort of lefties, people, black, even whites in music and so on. But they somehow weren't activists. And I started feeling I have to find the activists, because I want to do something. For me, it was existential.
Yes.
That I was disturbed being a white with privilege in this country at the expense of black people.
Yeah.
And I'm 20 now, so I'm beginning to mature. And I actually thought, I've got to leave this country because I'm actually benefiting from the enslavement of blacks. I'll go to
Just by your existence in this country as a white person.
I thought I'll go and I'll find a job in filming in Britain, and that was an exciting idea as well. But I loved this country. So I said to myself, okay, my boy, you love this country and you love the people. If you want to stay here and feel honourable, do something. So lucky family background. In that period, up to then, especially Second World War and so, there were quite a number of Jews who were in the Communist Party, including my mother's cousin who lived in Durban. And I was so serious, I took a holiday from work. I went to Durban.
This is why Ironstein?
Arenstein,
yes.
Jacqueline, she married a people's lawyer, Rowley, and he was underground on the run. ANC had been banned, Communist Party long banned, and I see her. So here's this young white guy, the special branch, don't know me. There are few whites who are involved. They know everybody and they can lock them up. So I now start helping Rowley in his underground work over a month or so that I'm off work. And it was like diving in at the deep end. I must say, the attraction of the adventure of it was very exciting, playing spies and clandestine work. But of course, I was driven by an objective. It was simple, freeing black people so we had equality. Okay, later on, all the ideology and the theories come in, how you do it. But that aspect, when I say to young people today, where your heart is, your sympathy, your commitment, that driving force is wonderful, it's dynamic, it's powerful.
Yes.
Follow that through, but in the process, learn more, not just theorizing, but practice and activity. And that's then my life. I could go on with this. We don't have the time.
Yeah.
Just to quickly say that I took off and I then joined the movement, and literally within a year and a half, MK is created. I had taken a transfer of a job doing filming in Durban, and I was deep in there, and they selected me to become involved in MK from the start. I then did a lot of very naughty things, blowing things up and so on with the
it was part of the fight. It was part of the...
So I became involved then, and the rest of my life was given into that, because just very quickly, within a year, I was banned. I was fired from my job, which was with Lever Brothers, and I became a full-time revolutionary from the age of 23.
And this lasts until 1994?
Right through. I was in exile. They sent me out for military training. We couldn't get back. It was very difficult because the underground had been smashed with Madiba and Sisulu and others arrested in 1963, sentenced to life in 64. By then I'd been to military training in Soviet Union. It was brilliant. And they were outstanding in their support for the Zimbabweans, the Mozambicans, Angolans, everybody you could think of, from Cuba to Vietnam, etc. We must understand that about the role of the Soviet Union. And then China and Cuba and so on, international solidarity. Your country of origin, Zimbabwe. I was so involved with the Zimbabwean comrades in Dar es Salaam in exile. I used to visit their office, and ZAPU then was very much the leading group.
Under Nkomo?
Under Nkomo. And the comrades from there, I so admired their fur hats that they were from. When I say fur, it was animal skin, like lion fur. They actually presented me with one of those hats.
Oh, that's amazing.
I used to wear it all the time, and I lost it at some stage. What a souvenir it would have been.
It's nice to hear like such fond memories you have of that point in the liberation struggle. Can we just now move then to talk about the transition period in South Africa?
Yes.
What is happening at that time? What are the conversations happening in terms of the negotiations? What is the atmosphere? And do you feel like that was the best way And that was the best outcome that came from the fight and the movements that had happened towards this moment.
Yes, sure. So just a little background of the history, because we've jumped literally from,
Yes,
like,
we
say,
have,
65 to 1990.
Yes.
It's a long period, hard struggle, based in, at first, Tanzania, later, after 75, big turning point, where Mozambique and Angola became liberated, revolutionary trenches of the revolution. And all the others, the Zimbabweans, the SWAPO comrades,
Yes.
and us, we training in Angola particularly. And the struggle starts shifting, where we get Zimbabwe and
independence,
after the freedom of Angola, Mozambique, and then Zimbabwe into the 1980s.
Yes.
The struggle in South Africa, people are greatly inspired, and also as a result of the oppression, the exploitation, Black consciousness movement plays a role in this. But by 76, the big turning point in South Africa, where the youth explode and many come across the borders. They don't really know much difference between ANC, PAC, etc. And I'm not going to go into a critique, but to say that the ANC were better organized, and we had people who had had fantastic training, had become very disciplined and committed. So when young people come out, having been prevented from understanding the history of the struggle. They were amazed when we started with the recruitment, training them and explaining the background and the history. They couldn't believe the things that we'd done before, including, by the way, the alliance of the ANC and ZAPU in the struggle against Smith's Rhodesia and the incursions across the border from Zambia into Zimbabwe. So this was all new, and you could see the youth who basically came out saying, well, the ANC is the one that's better organised, so we'll go to them. They can give us the guns. And they would say, I was now having to speak. For them to meet white guys like Slovo and Ronnie Kasrils was a shock. But very quickly they could understand who was with them, who wasn't, and so on. And the struggle wasn't just about skin colour, it's about a system. A system. A very important element to understand, always about the system. So it was quite funny. They all say, we're coming out. They want 6 weeks training. Just give us a gun and how to shoot it. We want to go back. Then we'd have to say, we sent some back because we wanted some action here and to show the people that the struggle was going to continue and continuing. But we also wanted comrades, these youngsters, to get really good political education and the military, the two going together, political and military must be together. Military on its own can't make the change. You get into
doesn't
big
make a good soldier, no.
It's always from the Chinese to the Cubans, the Vietnamese, the politics leads. So then people went to Cuba, Soviet Union, these other socialist countries, etc., and were being trained in Angola and so on, and coming back. In the process, of course, the uprising of the people in South Africa against the oppression, as I said, exploitation and indignities and so on, was catching on, and you started having an insurrectionary mentality and spirit. Cutting the long story short, to 1990, what was going on was the regime couldn't rule in the old way. Yes. And the people didn't want to live under the old way. No. Lenin made that point about a revolutionary situation. You had to have those two things, but you also needed to have a revolutionary organization. So the third point. And the fourth was an all-round socio-economic crisis in a country. The 4 points. The EFF and our youth must study Lenin and this question of how a revolution comes about. And that change. So this is putting such pressure on the regime. And internationally, we have a global movement, as we see with the Palestinian struggle today, which aided the Mozambicans and the Angolans and the Vietnamese in their struggle as well. International solidarity.
Yes.
EFF know and understand this. We see in the outreach to countries like Cuba and Venezuela,
Yes,
etc.
it's an interconnected struggle.
Absolutely,
Definitely.
organic struggle, interconnection. We talked about 4 pillars of struggle. The people in struggle, like Intifada, which is politics driven, and it's political struggle of the masses. The key, reinforced by armed struggle, by an underground system, and by international solidarity. The same with the Vietnamese. They talk that way. So we get into 1990, and other extraneous things happen. Collapse of the Soviet Union. So the Western countries, as ever, led by the US, and of course the former colonial powers of Europe, Britain and France and Germany and Holland and so on, they start saying to the regime, and they are chiming in with Oppenheimer and the business elite of this country, the business community, Stellenbosch mafia, Oppenheimers and so on. And they're basically saying to the National Party of P.W. Botha and then FW, they're saying this is the time. You can see, and the Boers were trying to pretend at reform. They created the tricameral parliament, leaving out Black African indigenous and giving coloured, mixed race and the Indian people some kind of fake vote, which was not in universal franchise, etc. So now there's contradiction within the governing party, the National Party, and between the PWs and those even more to the right, and people like a reformist in a sense, FW, listening to the business community and their own capitalists and then the imperialists. This is the time, because it's not communism now. Yes, there's a communist party, but it's not Russia will take over. So these things merge together.
So they're like, it might get worse than it is now.
If you don't change
now,
then you'll face a black revolution.
And you don't want that, because
You've
that's
got to
going to be...
control it. So you get into negotiations, and what they're wanting to do is to get a total compromise from the ANC leading the liberation forces, in which they actually are prepared as a class, capitalist class, to surrender political power. Doesn't mean that the clerk in the National Party, where they thought they could hold on somehow and split the ANC, but that's a secondary issue. The main thing about capital is that, yes, we've done it in Africa and Asia, etc. Let a new comprador black power emerge, and we will manage them, and we will rule together. That's what they wanted.
Yes, so the capital wants a new elite class, but that's black now.
Yes.
In order for them to be able to continue making money and being in charge.
It's cool, that's the comprador class, etc., that the Chinese communists always talked about. So you start getting into that negotiation. From the ANC side now, and again, I'm going to be very short, Madiba is actually, he is genuine, he wants the change, he really stands for black emergence and majority control, etc. Even the Communist Party, Slovo, Mabida before him, unfortunately he had died, etc. Even us, we never expected, this is the thing now, we couldn't expect that the Boers of Abono, the National Party, is going to actually say, okay, we'll release political prisoners, we'll lift the ban on the ANC, PAC, Communist Party even, and we can negotiate. In good faith, they say. Of course, they're doing things to weaken our front, okay? And in that, there's a lot of violence against the people to break them, you know? But what Madiba and even communists like Slovo see, and we had sharp debates, is that, comrades, we've got a chance to get political power in our hands without further bloodshed. There could be huge bloodshed with a civil war, and those guys have much greater shooting power than us. Okay, we have the power of the masses. And in terms of this, let's go for whatever compromises have to be made, and we've got the political power. Then, of course, some of the radicals, Hani, myself, and lots of others better than me, I'm just giving examples, are saying, no, but if they've got the political, if we've got political control, Madiba, they've got the
economic power.
How are we going to do it?
Yes.
Because in the end, it's the economic power. Okay, so that is a genuine debate. In the process, you can imagine the torment of the time. Black people were being slain with bombs that the right wing were placing in the stations around this very city and elsewhere. And there's then this question that, look, we can get political power. I think because we never imagined
that you would ever be at that point to begin with. It was
so much more attractive. And you can now, and we knew we would win the majority vote, which we easily did.
Yes.
So you think, okay, that's another step forward. And then from there, with that power, we'll be able to
implement
change the economic control.
Yes. And be in charge of policy, you'll be in charge of things, and you can change things around.
So please, comrades who are so critical must put themselves in those shoes and understand the context of those times. Without understanding the actual context, it looks like, oh, this is just a sellout. So I've been quite critical. I have written about this in a book about Jacob Zuma, by the way, called The Simple Man, and I called it
Simple Man.
a Faustian pact, etc. But I'm not saying that Madiba and his generation sold out. I do feel that we made some error of judgment. It's a different thing. You make errors all the time. It's impossible to be pure and to always get it right. So an error of judgment, sure, it's a big one, but that error was in the compromise, allowing too much in the first place. So I'll cite a few quick examples, such as we agree that we as a new government in power will take over the apartheid debt, which is billions.
Yes.
I believe that we, at that stage, unlike now, we had a united trade union movement. The workers of that time were much bigger in number numerically than now, because industries actually weakened through the neoliberal economy. And you had Black America. They would have gone to war for Madiba and so on. I think we could have held out for more and said, no way, those billions that you want from us, that's going into developing the schools for Black people, the infrastructure, etc. At a time when there wasn't so much of the corruption now, and where the ANC had tighter control. You know, this is where EFF are part of the ANC, after all, and a new rising younger leadership. I would say the biggest compromise, do you know that at that time, under Amabuna, the National Party, or from Botha to de Klerk, the corporate tax was 48%. We allowed that to drop to 28%. 28.
So we do come from a time where corporate tax was actually
the National Party, in terms of serving the interests of the Afrikaners.
They were socialist in principle, but socialist for white people.
Well, National Socialism, you know. I mean, it was racist,
Yes.
But they stood in terms of, such a minority. At that stage, I think the population was, say, 30 million, and you had about 3 or so million who are white.
Yes.
So they looked after their people through a corporatized government, but they were damn tough on corporate money until the economy started going pear-shaped. The banks were withdrawing and insisting on the rollover of debt because of the international situation, the global movement against apartheid, blah, blah. Okay, so that corporate tax from 48 to 28, we were starting to be influenced by the World Bank and the IMF.
Exactly.
That was the big problem. We gave too much. And that's where
it's always the case.
You can
because
say
you feel African countries usually feel, and indeed are normally powerless to a certain extent in these kinds of situations when it comes to these big financial institutions or these when we're looking at global corporate influence.
And can I add that they also were receiving students from even within the ANC and liberation movements who were studying at Harvard and London and New York, etc., business schools and so on, getting imbibed with this economic ideas of the World Bank, IMF, of Western capital, which we still have today, which is why we then, again, we've got to go quickly through this, the RDP, Reconstruction Development Program, was like social democratic. It was beginning to make inroads. I know as a water minister how we were really providing water to the rural people, the townships, etc. I mean, a lot was happening, RDP housing and so on. We switched to gear, which actually starts bringing us into the embrace of the neoliberal free capitalist market system. You get into that like countries, global south, and now they control you. Your industries start plummeting. That's this deindustrialization of the country. You start getting the weakening of the liberation movement. South Africa is not unique. Look at from Zimbabwe to Mozambique to Kenya, to Angola, etc., and others around the world. And you get sucked into it. You become imprisoned by it. And in that case, this is where corruption becomes rampant. This is where leaders start becoming bought, and the problems that we face today, in short.
Indeed, indeed. So we're at this point now, post-apartheid. We are in this neoliberal, like you said, it's impossible to escape.
Not impossible.
Not impossible, but it's easy to be drawn into. Yes,
becomes more difficult.
Danger. You are now around this time. You started as a minister.
I was Deputy Minister of Defence under Joe Modise.
Yes,
who was a very good, strong guy. Then I'm water and forestry. And then I know where you're going. 2004, I became the minister. It was a poison chalice. It's not the kind of job that's
the Minister of State and Security.
Well, it was intelligence agencies.
Intelligence agencies at that time. Yeah. Why do you call it the poison chalice?
It's a murky world.
Yes.
And you become detached from interaction with the people. I mean, just enjoyment-wise, to be water, to delivery, etc. And then to suddenly get into this kind of world it's not pleasant. It is not pleasant. I'm not saying I sold out. And I'm involved in that. And I start blowing a whistle because I see something happening then that we see today. I actually find in the intelligence agencies, especially the domestic NIA, NIA, National Intelligence Agency, we've got South African Secret Service, which operates abroad, foreign intelligence, that is. And I start realizing that own colleagues, much younger than me, say the 76 generation, I see that they are getting politically involved in divisions within the ANC. And my hands become full just trying to save the intelligence agencies. Not saying to comrades you can't be political, but don't get involved. You're not to be involved in the political aspect and choosing who should be the succession to Mbeki, and it leads to Polokwane.
Yes.
And then Jacob Zuma, who's supported by my comrades in the Communist Party. I fall out with the likes of Blade Nzimande and Jeremy Cronin at that stage, because they don't like Mbeki. And they anti him, they blame him for gear, but there are also other personal dislikes. And Mbeki was clearly the best leader that we've had. I stand by him, although I differ from him in quite a number of ways.
So you're now seeing that this
decline.
Now within the intelligence systems is now being undermined because of factions within the ANC.
You use the correct word.
So now the ANC, and I mean, people have said that moment in 2007 in Polokwane became a defining factor in our politics in South Africa.
Yes.
And if we're going to speak about perhaps what's happening now in terms of what General Mkhwanazi has spoken about in terms of the infiltration of our criminal and justice systems and intelligence systems, and how political it actually is.
Yes.
Do you think the decline began at that moment?
No, it doesn't. There's already an aspect. So I wrote this book, The Simple Man, about Zuma, and I'm very critical of him in terms of, and he showed where he was with all this radical talk, etc. What did he do about the economy when he was there for 8 years as president? But in the book, I say that, yes, Zuma contributes to this decline to an enormous extent in terms of his level of corrupt government. Whatever Mbeki and Madiba's governance is about, it's not about corruption. The only thing they point to, and I was involved in defense, was Mudisi and what they call the arms deal. That was a minor element, and it wasn't government at the top. Where you can point to corruption is again with Jacob Zuma, who at that particular point was an MEC in KZN. He wasn't part of the national decision-making. And to this day, there's nothing that's shown to being linked to Mudisi, who didn't die a wealthy man. I know this. I was so close to him. It's like my big brother. He didn't die a wealthy man at all. So anyway, there was that element, and people were looking out for corruption. I'm not saying there was nothing. There were comrades of the ANC who shook some of us by saying they never struggled for poverty. They struggled to become rich. You know, and they weren't actually taken to task. So there was a rot factor, which you will find in any struggle. Elements who are opportunistic, you come to power, and some who are saying, it's time for us to feed.
Yes, it's time to eat.
To eat, exactly. So I say in that book about Zuma that it's not just Zuma, he's taking advantage of a weakness that relates to the economy of the country and the way in which we had to make the compromise that we've already discussed. And of course, then things go downhill because the lack of discipline and the allowance, the latitude people have, whereas before it was in a smaller way, now it's
open, free for all.
You should be the one coming up with the explanation. So that's that particular aspect. And this is what, in a sense, in different ways, happens in Mozambique, in Angola, in so many countries, not just Africa. And remember, the most corrupt places, where are they? In the USA, in France, in Italy. Look at the number of politicians from France now to Italy, etc., where former presidents.
What's his name was in prison just now from France?
The French, okay, the name just evades me at the moment.
He's just gone into prison. We had the same thing in Korea, where president was also imprisoned. Philippines, yes. It's not unique to South Africa, of course.
Zimbabwe is not unique either.
So
we have to be, as a revolutionary movement, we've got to be so particular about the honesty factor. And look at the number of organizations in our country that have faced this kind of careerism
Yes.
and ambition that gets out of hand in political parties, not
It
just
happens,
the ANC.
yes, it happens to all of us.
You said
and
it.
we've been watching it happen. I mean, particularly this year in many different, in all of these young parties even, where the same things are taking place.
Exactly.
So your career at this point within government ends when Mbeki resigns. You also leave, and 2008. What pushes you to make that decision to leave with Mbeki?
So there's a group of about, I think it was 11 or 12 of us, who, with Mbeki being forced out, Zuma says to us, "Are you guys staying in?" He's not kicking us out. I remember saying to him, "Mkhwanazi, I have served Mbeki. You've seen to his departure, and I served his cabinet, so sorry, I'm resigning as well. In terms of integrity and conscience, I must walk with Mbeki." I was already turning 70, so you see how old the Madala
Yes.
is. And I had decided about a year or even more before, "Hey, man, Ronnie, there's some good comrades around. I'm 70, that's old enough. Let the young guys come in." I was going to leave anyway, but I would have served until the end of Mbeki's term, which would have been the end of 2009 or whatever. So
What do you think of this new culture within the ANC that leaders never finish out their terms? There's always a recall. There's always a it's become like quite a cyclical thing.
There's an element of a lack of true values that people are expressing, that they're not accepting the discipline of a revolutionary party, and that if you don't like the president, you start a faction and you start undermining and get rid of somebody who's doing a damn good job or a decent and acceptable job, and wait for a year or so. Why become so personalized, and then the throwing out of all sorts of rumor and dust, and allowing your real enemy to stoke this up because they want to divide you.
Indeed, but also the optics of it as well.
Exactly.
Like now, they don't look like a party that knows what they're doing. They don't look like a party that's organized and united. I mean, people can have factions, within, but how you appear should always be maintaining a particular vision or outlook that says we are together, we are deciding things together, and we are moving as a unit. And now, I mean, they've declined in the polls, under 50%, and are now in a coalition with the Democratic Alliance of all parties, the ANC that you knew, that you were part of, that fought for liberation, that was so revolutionary. Now in 2025 is in a coalition with the Democratic Alliance.
So, a lot of people have said, to rationalize this, that, well, Madiba had a government of national unity in appearance, but the ANC was king.
Yes, indeed.
And decided that we've got this power. Now we're going back, it's political power.
That's good.
We have a country where, particularly amongst the whites, although there were some, as we know, from Buthelezi and EFF of those days, that they actually part of counter-revolution. But you see that this formula that we had, this threat, could really destabilize and people being killed. So in the process, then, you've got to talk about the unity, and you hold out the olive branch.
Yes.
And so what do? You give 4 or 5 seats to FW and 4 or 5 of his lieutenants. They had no real power there. So it's nothing that can be compared to now. In terms of the choice for the ANC, whoever you are, if you don't have the majority, and in the ANC's case, because they lost the confidence and trust of the people. So you then have to have, you could have a minority government in running things, but that's pretty unstable. It can lose out at any moment. So, okay, you look at who can we create a unity with. Don't look at your main economic enemy who's going to really join with Western imperialism to undermine this country, which is the embrace we have. There are others. So I'm not sitting here to now advocate the formula and the parties. I know which ones I would have preferred. That's on the table still. And look at the problems that are now being created for our country. And the absolute traitors, including this extreme Afrikaner whites who are saying there's genocide, and how this sells out and plays into the hands of Donald Trump in terms of punishing this country. Can we rely on the existing GNU and so on? So that's a dilemma. It's the big question.
That it has emboldened white supremacists within South Africa. It has emboldened Solidarity and AfriForum to rise up, because there is no resistance. There is no the ANC is not speaking against it.
Exactly.
They are running roughshod across, like you said, connecting with Donald Trump, connecting with the global current rise in fascism, and using that as an opportunity to push an agenda in South Africa.
Yes.
And the ANC has made room for that.
And that is reflection of that danger of a rise of fascism in this country, whatever name you want to use. It's a big danger. And of course, blacks can become involved in that.
Definitely.
And all the more reason why, in a country like ours, your first choice, and you're talking about who's going to rule, and you're talking in the first place about the politics, etc., you must unify the black people.
Yes.
You must unify
Definitely.
the black people. If we don't, there's no chance.
Nothing.
There's no chance. You can't rule with white groups. I'm not a racist, and there's some really good Afrikaans, even business people and professionals. I know this from being in government, especially water affairs, by the way, with the white Afrikaner engineers in water who served us and did very well. So I'm not that kind of racist, and nowhere for them. We've got to ensure that those who are willing to transfer their loyalty feel that we are worth serving.
Yes.
And that's where we're losing out totally, because everyone's losing confidence and trust in the ANC. I want to just say, because I'm sure we're leading to the end and you want to get to Palestine, but there's a particular quote that I think is one of the best that serves us in this kind of situation we've come to. And it comes from an outstanding revolutionary from Angola called Lucio Lara. So he was of mixed descent, and he was Agostinho Neto's right-hand person.
Oh, wow.
And he was actually the key person who organized the MPLA. Neto was an outstanding leader, statesman, etc. And Neto dies, and Eduardo dos Santos, who had studied in the Soviet Union, by the way, that was more non-military service, didn't matter. I'm not against that as such, just mentioning it. And when Neto has died, it's actually Lucio, in terms of the unity of the MPLA, who nominates Dos Santos.
Oh, wow, okay.
And Dos Santos starts out okay.
Yes.
But things start going down, and there's the oil and who's benefiting from it. So government's getting in, and their emergent comprador bourgeoisie are becoming involved with the economics of the global West. And Lucio says to a friend of mine, Victoria Britton, a great Africanist from Britain, incidentally, and her name's Britton, who's written a lot of books on Africa. Thomas Sankara was one of her very people that she admired, and she wrote a book about him. So she interviews Lucio in his declining years. He became quite ill. And she says, where did you see the corruption and the turn of the MPLA from having been this foremost revolutionary party? And he says, Victoria, I can remember in the Central Committee, debates started about the way forward. And there were comrades who began in whispers and then felt bold enough to say that, you know, with the old man when he was alive and the MPLA of the old days, we used to say our primary service is to our people. But now there are guys saying, you know, we also as a group and a class here ought to become rich. What's wrong with that?
Oh.
And then he says, it gets to a point, he says he had become very concerned and there were very few voices opposing that drift. And he says, the day that somebody had the boldness to state that, you know, Neto used to say, our whole mission is to solve the problems of the people and uplift the poor. And one of the voices was now undermining that statement.
Yes.
And Lucio says to her, where we went wrong, where people's revolutionary movements go wrong, is when they stop saying that our role is to answer, to solve the problems of the people, because that's what we're all about.
Indeed. I think I can imagine where a lot of revolutionary parties, organizations, movements across the world have gone wrong in terms of stopping to ask that question about the people. And I think it's very sad, I think, it's particularly with what has happened now in relation to what Mkhwanazi has shared around the infiltration of policing, because South Africans have not felt safe for a long time.
Yeah.
They've not felt secure financially, food security-wise. They've not felt safe housing-wise, like for a long time. And what they've been hoping for a long time has not taken place.
Yeah.
And I wonder what you say, you know, Black unity is essential. But who must take up this mantle, and how are we taking up this mantle to change the direction of what has taken place in South Africa?
Yeah, well, it's the revolutionary forces. And you belong to one of the organizations that is a revolutionary force. There are others. A key weakness is that we have a divided trade union movement because they're vital. We have a divided liberation movement now as well. So we're challenged by this. And, you know, we need many lectures to discuss the question that everybody's been asking. How do we arrest this downward slope, which, in fact, most of the organizations are finding the weaknesses through an electorate who aren't voting anymore.
No, yeah.
You know,
we're getting less and less voters every
it's
election.
Getting less and less, hugely so. And that shows that the people are becoming disillusioned and that we've got to win back the trust and the confidence. So I'm saying the ANC's got to do that, Communist Party, EFF, etc., and any of trade unions.
Yes.
And that's being true to revolutionary principles, that it's all about the people and the upliftment and the emancipation of the people, not about ruling people and being self-elected leaders.
Indeed.
Right? It's a big question. And let me say, because you want a medalla here, do I believe it's possible? Yes. I think that we have organizations and leaders and rank and file people and our ordinary Black masses. And when I say Black, I'm including in working people of all backgrounds, including the Indian and the mixed race people. No, but the indigenous Black people are the majority and the key and the most downtrodden and most impoverished. And we see remarkable people from the grassroots emerging. We see people who start having political understanding, reading, study, debate. Education is very important. It's not the be-all to be a person who's with a doctorate or so. You know, there are many people like that who can give you the wrong advice, etc., and get it wrong. But the people are the key. And that's where any party worth its salt must be with the people, mustn't allow the gap, which the ANC
has
allowed most
yeah.
of all compared to the others that we might have in mind. Most of all, that gap developed because there's an elite at the top who basically, not all of them, they're very good people as well, but with people there who are now looking after themselves. So I'd like to end, before we go to Palestine, learning from the people. So I'm up in Limpopo, and I go to one of these nice places where you can do some swimming. I like swimming, and these like at Bele Bele. And there's a young lady, like you, but you know, she's simple township woman. When I say where you from with Elapi, she says the location. She's still using that term.
I like that.
Not the township. You mean the township?
The location.
Yeah. And then I like chatting, you know. So she's there, and we're going to have to swim there at night. So she's like on security duty. And so I say, no, how's the job, etc. So she's looking glum. I say, they're not paying you enough, right? Yeah, no, etc. So I get to the point where I'm now saying to her, so how's Bele Bele changed, given its history? So she says, they only interested in themselves. So I know that she's talking about Dortingtown. Okay, the blacks who are running, but I pretend I'm thinking it's the old whites, the poor, who obviously are the ones who have the economic control. So I say to her, well, you mean Amabunu, Abelungu? She said, no, our people. They're only interested in themselves.
Yes.
And that is the message. And you can have all the professors in the world, etc., analysing what's going wrong in this powder keg in our country that's going to explode. You just ask a simple person on the ground, what's the problem? They're just serving themselves. You can't have a movement a movement like that will die. You've got to turn it around. You've got to get a radical revolutionary change in the movement itself. And that's the answer. Okay, simply put, there's so much else that goes into it. Getting things right in terms of the democratic aspect within a movement, but most of all, it's closeness to the people on the ground.
I appreciate that. I think
and
that's
it's the youth who are the future.
The future, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that revolutionary and especially particularly ideological shift, but for it to be reflected in the movement itself, I think is something that is very important. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. Of course, to end our conversation, you have been involved in standing for Palestine your whole life, and I like that you began when you spoke about your parents in the beginning, who are Jewish, and that they also did not stand for the occupation of Palestine to set up Israel. And I can imagine, I think, when I was reading around, what you have said about Palestine and Israel over the years, what I found particularly interesting was just not you just standing up for the Palestinian struggle, but your alignment and support of Hamas itself, which is something very, very bold. And I think a lot of people still look at Hamas as like, well, Palestine can fight, but Hamas is still too terroristy, obviously because of propaganda and the way they've seen it. But you've been a proponent of Hamas. Can we talk about that?
Okay, so I'm not saying that Hamas is the only answer.
Of course.
Okay. I'm also a non-believer, okay? I'm an atheist, I don't believe. And I respect the religions, from Judaism to Christianity to Islam, Buddhism, and so on. Because those religions do offer believers some way of putting up with the problems of life on earth, okay? And they have ideas of the hereafter, etc. Where you have extremism in religion, it's as bad as extremism in any of those beliefs. Very dangerous, and we're seeing it with Christian Zionism.
Yes.
We see it with Judaism, how the Zionist, which is a nationalist movement, very right-wing, proto-fascist in fact, it hijacked Judaism. And these original founders of Zionism, this is the late 19th century, they were agnostics, they were atheists, anti-communists, etc. Some a bit socialist inclined, but in the nationalist sense, which is always dangerous, by the way, because socialism has got to be embracive of all, not just for your own particular community. Yeah. That's Nazism in the end. So why is it that I will defend Hamas without being a proponent? Because I would prefer a left-wing secular movement, which is where we did support the PLO in the past. But then the PLO stopped really fighting and resisting. And there's corruption there in the PA, which represents the
Palestinian Authority.
The Fatah, who was so close with the ANC. They lost it. And it's Hamas who then show that they will fight and resist, which is the right of any people under oppression and occupation, have the right in international law to take up arms. And that's where one respects them and sees their commitment. And I've had lots of discussions over the years while I was intelligence minister, etc., meeting Hania when he was in Gaza as the prime minister, and other of their leaders in Damascus and so on. They were very interested in the South African struggle. And I would explain how we managed and how the ANC in those days was able to actually attract, okay, it was a very small number of white people who weren't going to be the saviors, but just this point about how one should be broad in relation to the values you stand for. And then when it came to discussing armed struggle, I would always bring in the political aspect of armed struggle and leadership. And they were very interested. So we see how the Zionist Israeli neo-colonial, settler colonial Zionist racist state sees Hamas as the enemy and uses Hamas and Islam the way the Boers here used communism, etc. So I've given them that support, and I will repeat that all the time, and they have every right and they need that kind of support internationally. But it's not just Hamas. The resistance of the Palestinians, I'm using resistance with a big R, the resistance movement, of which Hamas is the most well-known and had carried out an amazing attack on 7th of October. So the Zionists all deplore me, saying that I'm the one who applauds the slaughter of all those children, and there weren't that many children. It's all exaggerated. Rape of women, there were no rapes, or maybe a very few. A Muslim person doesn't get involved in rape, by the way, who's genuine. And something like, I said, 1/3 of the 1,200 who were killed, or the 2,000, were not killed by whether it was Hamas or Islamic Jihad or other resistance, or some people who just came out and carried a club, who didn't belong anywhere. But through the Hannibal doctrine, of killing your own Israelis because you don't want them to fall in the hands of your enemy as so-called hostages. And of course, they made out, as I was saying, that I was applauding the killing of civilians or children or whatever, and it's not so. I was looking at the guerrilla tactic and how well it had been carried out. And of course, Israel, with all the support from the USA, of Biden to Trump, and the EU, those colonial powers of the past and still neo-colonial, with all the support, they haven't managed to crush the resistance
of
inside
Hamas
Gaza.
till this day.
So, look, we can talk a lot about this. The Palestinians have every right to resist in any way.
In any way, yes.
Armed struggle, non-violent, violent, but where does non-violent struggle
and
get
you? They have for a long
situation?
time, they have engaged in non-violent struggle.
Yes.
Severally over the years, many
Yes.
campaigns, many movements.
Yes.
And it hasn't worked because you're dealing with a very violent occupation.
Yes.
You're dealing with a very violent, well-armed, to the teeth
Exactly.
occupation by Israel, which is supported across the world. So
Yes,
they do indeed. But when we're coming back to the issue in South Africa, you know, particularly after October 7th, we start again, movements start again, the EFF, the PSA, many Palestinian solidarity movements begin once again to push against Israel in South Africa. And it's about ending trade with Israel, and it's about ending diplomatic ties with Israel, which is one of the things that EFF marched for. And there was a motion within Parliament that was passed where to close the Israeli embassy and cut diplomatic ties with Israel.
Yes.
It's been over 2 years now. It was 2 years now. It's 2 years this month.
Yes.
And President Mkhwanazi has still not signed off on that.
Yes. You know, when the EFF, give it its due, I didn't want to come here and be party political.
Yes.
Okay. When the EFF were actually the architects of that, and they put that motion to Parliament, the ANC in Parliament got on board. I was so happy, as were all comrades who wanted to see solidarity with Palestine, and I phoned you at this office to pass on my best wishes, my congratulations to El Jefe, Comandante Julius Malema, your leader, from the bottom of my heart. That's a parliamentary resolution, and it's, as you say, 2 years, and it hasn't been implemented. Look, in those 2 years, what Israel has done to the Palestinian people. Look what's happening on the West Bank. Look what's happened in Gaza, the genocide, which we've never seen anything as bad as since the Second World War, which the Holocaust wasn't just the execution of Jewish people. You know, they leave out the socialists, the Marxists, the communists, the Roma people, that's what we would call gypsy people.
Gypsies,
and so many prisoners of war from Russia, something like 3 million in the end, Polish people, and so on. It's so horrendous, and the kind of torture, the bestiality, the rapes, and it's unbelievable. And we're still sitting on that resolution. And Israel has been attacking its neighbors.
Its
and
neighbors
still
as
is.
well, yes.
So what's the response? We've got a government, whoever is there, civil society, must muster its forces, parliamentary groups, extra-parliamentary struggle, the civil society, the trade unions, and we must demand of our government. It's the biggest way in which we can contribute to the Palestinians who supported us in our struggle in relation to the isolation of the apartheid regime of South Africa, the isolation of Zionist settler colonial Israel, racism, neo-fascism, and so on. And that's where what we can do is get behind boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, total isolation, cutting ties, boycotting business, trade, arms supplies to Israel. If America today said to Israel, stop,
No.
if you don't stop, no more funds, no more weapons, you'll see a change immediately. So the US becomes a prime target of protest as well. And we mustn't kowtow to Trump or whoever runs the United States, whoever is in the White House, unless it's somebody who totally changes its approach. This is the big challenge in relation to Palestine. And what the EFF shows is something that's so appreciated, something I applaud. And I say, take the leadership. You've done so before. But I appeal to everybody of this country to make this change and get our government to change and our business to change.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us, Uncle Ronnie. I think after that conversation, we can be comfortable.
Siyabonga kakhulu. Good luck in your job.
Yes, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing with us.
It's a pleasure.
I know it was not easy. We went longer than we were meant to, but you were on a roll and you shared so much with us. Thank you very much for your insights and for the stories of where we've come from as a country.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you soon somewhere around.
Sure.
All right.
All the best. Thanks.
Thank you.